Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we got a bit of a bombshell this morning as we got a report from Ian Rappaport not only suggesting that Trevor Lawrence was unlikely to play this Sunday versus the Vikings, but that he is weighing options for the future. What that means, a little unclear. I think once you look into it deeper, it makes a bit more sense, but this was a confusing statement to get this morning. He's out there in practice. I don't think he's been full this week, but he's still out on the field. But there's been some talk that Trevor Lawrence might end up getting surgery on his shoulder. He might end up sitting out the rest of the year, that is a possibility right now. And there was even a report from former Jaguars offensive coordinator Jay Gruden that it was going to be surgery, that sources knew that. And now this was a little debated because Ian kind of shut it down a little bit, saying that nothing was scheduled, and you can read this all for yourself. So this is all kind of an unknown, what's going on. We don't know for sure that he's sitting out the rest of the year. We don't know if he's going to continue to play through this. Ignore this gif. Just look down at that. But we really don't know what's going to happen yet. But we do think it's unlikely that he's going to play this weekend against the Vikings. That would probably set the Jaguars to 2-8, you'd have to think. Very unlikely this team would win otherwise, unless the Vikings do what the Vikings do. But the Jaguars could do what the Jaguars do as well. That's kind of the problem there. But, we'll talk about this, right? And just kind of the different perspectives on this, because it gets to the point where you're thinking, well, should he sit out the rest of this year? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think it really matters what perspective you're looking at it from, right? And from the perspective of people on this team, I think that everyone except maybe Shad Khan, and I don't even know if he'd have an opinion on it, I would imagine everyone wants him to be able to play the rest of the season. Through this, that is, and to get surgery later on if he needs it. Reason why is pretty obvious, right? You're 2-7. This is supposed to be the best team in Jaguars history. It's not. Newsflash. You're not going to keep your job if Trevor Lawrence is out. You're not going to go to back up McCorkle Jones and make a playoff run from 2-7. It's over. You're going to miss. You're going to be fired. And so for Doug Peterson, Press Taylor, Trent Baalke, even Ryan Nielsen, who won't really have anything to do with this decision, you want to see him play through this because your ass is on the line. For Shad Khan, I don't know. I'm sure he wants to see his quarterback out there, but if you're looking at this from a long-term perspective, if you're of the mindset that you're going to move on and you just haven't done the firings yet and you're going to let it play out through the year like they did in 2020, I would have to think you'd consider sitting him out because a few reasons. One, you don't want to make that injury worse and then have that impact the next season. And two, I think there's an argument that you're okay with this team not really playing that well at the end of the season now that it's pretty much over. You're not even going to have them this next game, most likely. That alone might eliminate the Jaguars in the playoffs at the end of the day, regardless of what they do from that point, especially if every team in the playoffs has 10 wins. So you're just in a situation where, what's the point, right? Maybe you want to be bad the rest of this season. Not that you're not going to try, but you're not going to have a team that can do it. You don't have the coaching that's going to be able to do it. Maybe you finish with the first overall pick, right? And if you do, we'll take a look at the way things sit there. I think we looked at this after the last game. But there's a big tie for first place in the draft. And the Jaguars have one of the best tiebreakers here because of strength of schedule. So far, the opponents they've played have been bad. Just in general, right? On average, their opponents, even factoring in the fact that the Jaguars are losing to them should make their strength of schedule higher, they don't hit 500 yet. So with that said, if there's a multi-team tiebreaker, it's often going to come down to strength of schedule, which is what you see here for how these teams are ranked. So if you're not winning any more games, if Trevor Lawrence is out the rest of this year, you're probably picking first overall. Even if a team like the Saints lost out. You don't play them this year. And they're not going to have a worse strength of schedule unless something drastic happens. That's always possible, right? But the Jaguars have the NFC North. New Orleans Saints have a really bad division. Jacksonville does too. But I think Jacksonville would end up taking that. I think New England wins one more game. I don't think they lose out. They got Drake May in there. I know he got hurt the other day. I don't think he's out for the season. Maybe I'm wrong. But ultimately, you have a strong case for getting the first overall pick. And if you have the first overall pick, there's a few things you can do with that and why this is attractive to the new head coach and new GM. And that's the main reason why we're talking about this. Because if you have the first overall pick, you got two things you could probably do. And maybe you could do both of them, depending on how well you play it and what the order of the draft is. You could stay at number one, pick a player like Travis Hunter. You know, a player that you think might be generational, might be able to play both ways, and do it at an elite level, right? Generally, that's the consensus about how people feel about him. Some don't, but that's all right. The alternative is that you move out of the pick, you take a haul like the Bears did, because the quarterbacks are there. There was a debate on that early on, but Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, I think those quarterbacks are capable of going first overall. If Bryce Young went first overall, I think one of them could. That's just the way I look at it right now. So if that happens, you could get a haul. You could get 3 first-rounders for that. You could get a top player. You know, I'll throw this one out there. For the one guy who's always talking about getting Jackson Powers-Johnson from the Raiders, you could trade back with the Raiders and tell them, you got to give me that player. And you go get yourself what's a future all-pro center in a trade. You see what the Bears did to get DJ Moore, right? There's creative ways that you can do this. Maybe you do it all. Say that you're picking first overall, New Orleans is second, and Las Vegas is third. And you trade back with Las Vegas. You probably don't get as much because you're, moving from 1 to 3, but you're still probably getting a future first. They all take quarterbacks, and you get Travis Hunter, and you get extra picks. You get kind of what I'm saying, where I'm not saying that has to drive the entire decision, but I think it has to be considered because that's going to be attractive for a GM. It's going to be attractive for a head coach. And ultimately, you need to do what's best for this team. And for Trevor Lawrence, I'm sure he wants to continue playing. I'm sure he wants to play through it. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know inside his mind, but he's a competitor. He doesn't want to sit on the bench and watch his teammates play. So you just got to make the right decision here. If this is a small thing that he should be fine through and you're comfortable for the rest of the season, maybe you're all right. But consider this too. Left shoulder, right? Who's protecting the left side of this offensive line right now? Walker Little is the starter. He didn't really play that great last game, at least from what I saw. Who's your left guard? Ezra Cleveland. He's hurt right now. So how's that going to work out? Are you going to be able to keep him healthy the rest of the year? This is something where I would absolutely be considering taking some caution and basically just throwing in the towel for this season to make sure you don't hurt your quarterback worse. And it has to be considered because this team is 2-7. But I get it. I get both sides of it, right? You don't want to just throw in the towel on a season when you have a franchise quarterback. That's not ideal, right? You don't want to try to tank in these kinds of seasons. That's usually not good for the culture, right? But there's some times where that ends up happening, and making a move like this to let Trevor Lawrence recover ends up being the best decision that you could make. I think it's debatable, and I understand both sides of it. I'm curious what you guys all think. Would love to know in the comments. But I want to thank you all for joining me here. I want to shout out our channel members, Premier Nasir 904, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, and Brian Foster. If you guys want to join as a channel member, you got all your information here. You can message me in the comments. I'll let you know everything I can. But I appreciate everyone who's supporting this channel, whether a channel member or someone just watching the video. Love having you guys here. Love hearing what you got to say. So that's all I got. Appreciate you watching. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.